The moment my parents told me they'd sold my dead sister's car to fund their cruise vacation, something crystallized inside me. Not grief. I'd been drowning in that for 8 months since Rachel's accident, but a cold, clarifying fury. They disposed of her blue Corolla, my last sanctuary where her scent still lingered on the seats and her voice lived in the stereo, without a second thought, toasting their fresh start with expensive wine while wearing the pendant containing her ashes like a fashion accessory. What they didn't realize as they sailed away, posting carefree selfies and planning their secret divorce, that empty space in the garage wasn't just where Rachel's car had been. It was where their perfect family facade began to crumble, and where their quiet daughter started collecting the evidence that would shatter everything they'd built. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The garage felt colder at night. That's when I would slip inside, keys clutched in my hand, and slide into the driver's seat of Rachel's car. Not my car. Never my car. It would always be hers. Tonight was no different. The clock on my phone read 2:17 a.m. as I eased the side door closed behind me, careful not to let it click too loudly. My parents were heavy sleepers, but I couldn't risk them finding me here. They wouldn't understand. Rachel's scent still lingered in the fabric of the seats, though fainter now, 8 months after the accident. A mixture of her vanilla perfume and that specific shampoo she always used, the expensive kind our mother complained about. I inhaled deeply, eyes closed, pretending for just a moment that she might appear beside me with that laugh of hers, the one that seemed to start in her toes and bubble all the way up. "You're being weird again, Em," she would have said, rolling her eyes but smiling anyway. I ran my fingers over the steering wheel, tracing the small nick on the left side where she'd scraped it against a parking meter during one of our downtown adventures. The blue Toyota Corolla wasn't anything special by most standards, a 5-year-old model with nearly 80,000 miles on it, but it was everything to me now. The last untouched piece of her world. I pressed the power button on the stereo, keeping the volume low. The CD player whirred to life, picking up midway through track 4 of that indie album she'd been obsessed with last summer. I'd memorized every lyric, every guitar strum, every pause for breath the vocalist took. My journal sat open on my lap, the pages illuminated only by the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Tonight's entry began like most others. "I miss you so much it physically hurts. Today Mom put your framed graduation photo in a box labeled storage." I wanted to scream. The tears came, as they always did. I let them fall onto the page, watching the ink blur slightly under their weight. Rachel had been the strong one, the vibrant one, the one who stood between me and our parents' impossible expectations, their emotional frigidity. At 27, she had already built the kind of life I could only dream of: successful graphic design career, her own apartment downtown, friends who adored her. She had plans, so many plans. "When you finish college, we'll take my car and drive up the coast," she'd promised just weeks before the accident. "We'll stop whenever we want, stay in cute little towns, eat at weird diners. No schedule, no parents calling every hour for updates. Just us." Now there was just me. The house above the garage was silent. From the outside, we lived in suburban perfection, Tudor-style home in an exclusive neighborhood, immaculate landscaping, my father's luxury sedan parked beside my mother's sporty crossover. Their matching vanity plates spoke volumes. WINRS1 and WINRS2. The successful power couple who built an investment empire from nothing. The perfect American dream. No one saw how they barely touched each other anymore. How dinner conversation revolved solely around stock options and client acquisitions. How they transformed grief into productivity, throwing themselves into work within days of the funeral. "We all process differently, Emily," my father had said when I questioned their apparent lack of emotion. "Some of us can't afford to fall apart." I traced the outline of Rachel's keychain, a small metal sunflower, her favorite. She'd been the only one who understood what it was like growing up with Robert and Diana Patterson as parents. The mandatory piano lessons neither of us wanted, the summer language immersion programs, the constant pressure to achieve, achieve, achieve. They mean well, Rachel would say when I cried. They just don't know how to show love without conditions. But she'd been my buffer, my translator, my protector. Without her, I was drowning in their expectations while simultaneously becoming invisible to them. Lately, though, something had shifted. They seemed almost upbeat. My mother had started planning weekend brunches with her friends again. My father had resumed his golf games. They spoke in hushed, excited tones when they thought I couldn't hear, dropping phrases like, "We deserve this," and finally moving forward. Last week, I overheard them in their study, the door slightly ajar. "It's time," my father had said. "We can't keep looking backward." "But what about Emily?" my mother had asked, her voice unusually hesitant. "She'll understand eventually. She needs to move on too." The next morning over breakfast, I'd asked them directly what they meant. My mother had sipped her protein shake, avoiding eye contact. "We've been thinking about decluttering, sweetheart. Removing some of the pain around the house." "What does that mean exactly?" I'd pressed, a knot forming in my stomach. Just focusing on the future, my father had interrupted, checking his watch. "We all need a fresh start." Now, sitting in Rachel's car, I flipped through my journal entries from the past few months. The grief, the isolation, the growing suspicion that my parents were planning something that would hurt me deeply. Rachel would have known what to do. Rachel always knew. I stayed in the car until nearly dawn, finally dragging myself back to my room just as the sky began to lighten. I slept fitfully for a few hours before my alarm jolted me awake. Friday. I had a psychology exam at 11, then work at the campus library until closing. It would be a long day. By the time I made it back home, streetlights were already on, casting long shadows across our manicured lawn. I was exhausted, my limbs heavy with fatigue, but a small part of me looked forward to another quiet moment in Rachel's car later that night. Maybe I'd play track 7, her absolute favorite. I punched in the garage door code and waited for it to rise. As the door lifted, confusion washed over me. The space where Rachel's car always sat was empty. Empty. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stepped inside, as if getting closer would somehow make the car materialize. I touched the concrete where her tires had left faint marks over time. Nothing. The side door opened, and my mother appeared, wearing a new silk blouse I hadn't seen before. "Oh, you're home. Perfect timing, dinner's almost ready." "Where's Rachel's car?" The words came out strangled, barely audible. "Come inside, Emily. Your father opened that special Cabernet." I followed her in a daze, my body moving on autopilot while my mind screamed in panic. In the dining room, my father was setting the table with the good china, humming to himself. "What's the occasion?" I managed to ask, though I already knew something terrible was happening. "Well," my mother beamed, exchanging glances with my father, "we have some exciting news." My father poured 3 glasses of wine, sliding one toward me with an unusual smile. "We're taking that cruise we've always talked about. 14 days, private balcony suite, the works. We leave next week." "That's great," I said slowly. "But where is Rachel's car?" A beat of silence. Then my mother laughed lightly, the sound like glass breaking. "We sold it this morning, dear. Got a very reasonable price considering the mileage." The room tilted. "You sold it? Without asking me? Without even telling me?" My father took a deliberate sip of wine. "It was just sitting there, Emily, depreciating in value every day." "It was Rachel's," I whispered, feeling something crack inside me. "It was just a thing, Emily," my mother said, her voice hardening. "It's time to move on. The cruise will be good for all of us. A fresh start." My father nodded. "And the extra cash means we could upgrade to the premium package. Spa treatments included." They continued talking, their voices fading into background noise as I stared at the wall behind them. The car was gone. The last piece of Rachel, the one place I could still feel close to her, had been sold for a vacation package. "It was just a thing, Emily," my mother repeated, reaching for the salad tongs. "It's time to move on." 3 days had passed since the garage emptied, and I hadn't spoken more than 10 words to my parents. What was there to say? My grief had sharpened into something dangerous, something with edges that cut me from the inside. I sat cross-legged on my bed, scrolling through my mother's Instagram. 2 hours ago, she'd posted a photo of herself and my father on the ship's deck, Caribbean sun gleaming off their matching designer sunglasses, tropical drinks in hand. The caption read, "Day one of our new beginning. #blessed, #moving forward, #cruise life." 37 likes already. Comments like, "You deserve this," and "So happy to see you smiling again," filled the space beneath the image. Nobody mentioned Rachel. It was as if she'd never existed. I switched to Facebook and found more of the same, my parents posing by the ship's railing, exploring the first port of call, attending the captain's dinner. In each photo, they looked younger somehow, unburdened, free. My mother wore a new sundress in every picture. My father sported a deep tan already. Their smiles were wider than I'd seen in years. With trembling fingers, I opened a browser tab and searched for local used car listings. It took only minutes to find it. Rachel's blue Corolla, listed by Eastern Motors with poor quality photos that didn't capture the small scratch on the passenger door or the slight discoloration on the back seat from when she'd spilled coffee during a road trip. They'd priced it at $8,700. $8,700. That's what Rachel's memory was worth to them. I closed my laptop and curled onto my side, pressing my face into the pillow to muffle a scream that rose from someplace deeper than my lungs. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Karen, my mother's oldest friend who had been more of an actual aunt to Rachel and me than any blood relative. Saw the cruise photos. "How are you holding up, sweetie?" Karen had been the only one who acknowledged my pain after the funeral, who sat with me while I cried instead of offering platitudes about Rachel being in a better place. I typed back, "They sold her car." Without telling me. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally. "Oh, Emily. I'm coming over. Be there in 20. Karen arrived with takeout and a bottle of wine, though I was only 24 and technically not supposed to drink at home. "Your parents wouldn't approve," she said with a wink as she poured me a glass, "but some rules need breaking." We sat at the kitchen island, pushing lo mein around on our plates. "When did they decide on the cruise?" I asked. Karen hesitated. "They've been planning it for a while, I think. Since before." "Since before they sold Rachel's car?" She nodded. "Emily, there's something else you should know." She took a long sip of wine, not meeting my eyes. "The cruise isn't just a vacation." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "I overheard them talking at the Christmas party. They're..." She paused, weighing her words. "They're getting divorced." The room went silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. "Divorced?" I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. Karen nodded. "They've been planning it quietly. The cruise is their last hurrah together before they separate. Your father is meeting someone in Bali next week. I think it's been going on for a while. Your mother knows. She has her own plans, too." I thought about the hushed conversations, the sudden decision to move forward, the frenetic energy that had filled the house in recent weeks. "But they've been posting all these happy couple photos," I said, confused. "Image management," Karen said quietly. "You know how they are. Everything has to look perfect from the outside." I felt like I'd been submerged in ice water. Did Rachel know? Before the accident, Karen's expression answered before her words did. She suspected something wasn't right. She mentioned it to me once. "And there's more," Karen continued, looking pained. "I heard your mother telling Susan that they're planning to sell the house as soon as they get back. They're talking about getting rid of everything that belongs to Rachel. Your mother said it's part of their fresh start." My hand tightened around the wine glass, so hard I feared it might shatter. "That can't be legal. Rachel's things belong to me. It was in her will." Karen looked surprised. "You've seen the will?" I realized. After the funeral, my parents had handled everything. They told me Rachel had left me personal items, but that the rest was complicated. I'd been too grief-stricken to question them. That night, after Karen left, I found myself deep in a rabbit hole of my mother's social media. I clicked on a video she'd posted from their first formal dinner on the ship. She was showing off her new jewelry, including a delicate gold pendant I recognized with horror. "And this," she said to the camera, touching it lovingly, "is my good luck charm for the trip." The pendant contained Rachel's ashes, a small portion that my mother had insisted on keeping while the rest were interred. She was wearing my dead sister's remains as an accessory for her divorce cruise. I was still awake when they called the next morning, their faces stretched into wide smiles on my phone screen. "Emily, are you eating properly? The house looks a mess behind you," my mother clucked, peering through the video call. "Where are Rachel's things?" I asked without preamble. Their smiles faltered simultaneously. "What things specifically?" my father asked, his voice cautious. "All of her things. Her clothes, her art supplies, her books. The boxes from her apartment that you said you were storing until I had my own place." My mother waved dismissively. "We donated most of it, honey. It was just taking up space, and you know Rachel would have wanted her things to help others." The lie was so blatant it took my breath away. Rachel had specifically told me many times that she wanted me to have her art supplies, her book collection, her vintage record player. "You had no right," I said, my voice shaking. "She was my sister." "And she was our daughter," my father snapped, his fake smile completely gone now. "Frankly, Emily, your attachment to her things is becoming unhealthy. This is exactly why we needed to step in." "Step in?" "By selling her car for a divorce cruise." Their faces froze. Then my mother laughed, the sound brittle and false. "What nonsense! Who's been filling your head with these ridiculous ideas?" "We're renewing our commitment to each other," my father added smoothly. "That's what this trip is about. Healing together." Another lie. "And that pendant you're wearing?" I pressed, watching my mother's hand instinctively reach for it. "Those are Rachel's ashes. Her remains. And you're using them as a fashion accessory." "It keeps her close to my heart," my mother said, her voice sugary. "You're being dramatic, Emily. This is why we worried about leaving you alone. You're clearly not in a healthy mental state." The gaslighting was so expert, so practiced, I almost questioned my own reality for a moment. Almost. "When are you coming home?" I asked, suddenly exhausted. 2 weeks, my father said. "And when we return, we should discuss your future. Your living arrangements, your career path. It's time for some changes." After the call ended, I sat motionless, staring at the blank screen. Everything was falling apart, and I had no one to turn to. Rachel would have known what to do. The next day, I made an emergency appointment with Dr. Marshall, the therapist I'd been seeing sporadically since the accident. "They sold her car," I said, the words tumbling out before I'd even settled into the chair. "They're wearing her ashes as jewelry on a cruise while planning their divorce. They've gotten rid of her things. They're selling the house. They lied about her will. And when I confronted them, they suggested I'm mentally unstable." Dr. Marshall listened without interruption, her expression compassionate but neutral. When I finally ran out of words, she leaned forward slightly. "Emily, I want to be clear about something. Your grief is valid. Your attachment to your sister's possessions is normal and healthy. What you're describing, your parents' behavior, is concerning on multiple levels. So, I'm not crazy?" The question came out smaller than I intended. "No," she said firmly. "You are experiencing a profound loss compounded by what appears to be a significant betrayal of trust. That's a traumatic combination." I didn't realize I was crying until she handed me a tissue. "What should I do? Try to reason with them again?" Dr. Marshall considered this. "Based on what you've described, further confrontation might not be productive. Sometimes, when people are committed to a particular narrative, challenging that narrative only entrenches them further." "So, I just accept it? Let them erase Rachel?" She shook her head. "No. But you might need to approach this differently. Focus on what you can control, on preserving your connection to your sister in ways they can't touch." I thought about this as I walked home, the spring air unusually cold against my tear-stained face. Rachel wouldn't have accepted this situation. Rachel would have fought back. But Rachel had also been strategic, patient. She didn't waste energy on battles she couldn't win. By the time I reached my parents' house, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't confront them anymore. I wouldn't plead or argue, or try to make them understand. I would disappear. But not quietly. The night air felt electric against my skin as I loaded the last bag into my car. 3 suitcases, 2 boxes of essential belongings, my laptop, and Rachel's jewelry box. The one thing of hers I'd managed to hide before my parents' purge. It wasn't much for a new life, but it would have to do. My parents wouldn't be home for another 11 days. By then, I'd be long gone. I'd withdrawn my savings that morning. Not a fortune at $6,300, but enough to get started somewhere new. Somewhere Rachel had once dreamed of living. I think I could be happy in Oakridge, she told me once, showing me pictures of a small artistic community 3 hours north. It's got this amazing creative energy, affordable studios, and people who value art over stock portfolios. That's where I was headed now, as midnight approached on a Tuesday. I left no note. There was nothing left to say. The highway stretched before me, empty and dark. I turned on the radio, letting unfamiliar music fill the silence that Rachel would have occupied with her running commentary, her laughter, her plans. Going full mysterious disappearance on them, she would have approved with a grin. Very dramatic, M. By dawn, I'd reached Oakridge. The small town was just waking up, lights coming on in cozy coffeehouses, early risers walking dogs along tree-lined streets. I found a diner and ordered breakfast, studying rental listings on my phone. By noon, I'd secured a small room in a converted Victorian house owned by an elderly woman named Dorothy, who didn't ask too many questions when I paid the first month in cash and gave my name simply as M. Artists are always welcome here, she'd said, noting my portfolio case. My late husband was a sculptor. The room was tiny, but had a large window overlooking a garden bursting with spring flowers. It reminded me of the watercolors Rachel used to paint, vibrant, slightly messy, full of life. I spent that first day walking around Oakridge, getting my bearings. The town centered around a quaint main street with independent shops, cafes, and galleries. I stopped at a flower shop with a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. The owner, Lily, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and dirt-stained hands, hired me on the spot after I mentioned my work at the campus greenhouse during sophomore year. "I need someone with a good eye," she'd said, surveying me. "And you look like you could use a fresh start." I began working the next day, arranging bouquets, helping customers, learning the rhythm of small-town commerce. The work was soothing, keeping my hands busy while my mind processed everything that had happened. At night, I painted. Not well, not with Rachel's natural talent, but with a desperate need to express the storm inside me. I covered canvas after canvas with dark swirls, fractured shapes, occasional bursts of color breaking through the shadows. During those first quiet weeks, I avoided social media entirely. I didn't want to see more cruise photos, more evidence of my parents' betrayal. Instead, I focused on building a routine in my new life: work, painting, solitary walks along the town's river path. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after arriving in Oakridge, I finally worked up the courage to unpack Rachel's jewelry box. Inside, nestled among her favorite pieces, I found a small external hard drive I didn't recognize, labeled simply "Our Backup." My hands trembled as I connected it to my laptop. The drive contained folders of photos, music, design projects, and most preciously, a folder labeled Cloud Backup with login credentials for her online accounts. I typed in the information, holding my breath, and suddenly I was inside Rachel's digital world. Her emails, her documents, her private files, all preserved exactly as she'd left them. Among them, I discovered a folder of voice memos. The first one I played brought her voice rushing back with such clarity that I nearly collapsed. "Testing, testing," Rachel's voice said, laughing slightly. "I feel stupid talking to myself, but Dr. Winters says keeping an audio journal might help with the anxiety." I played memo after memo, tears streaming down my face as Rachel narrated her days, her struggles, her triumphs. Then I reached one dated just 2 weeks before the accident that made my blood run cold. Something weird is happening with Mom and Dad's foundation accounts, Rachel said, her voice lower than usual, concerned. I was helping update their website, pro bono, of course, because heaven forbid they actually pay their daughter for professional design work, and I noticed some discrepancies in the financial reports they wanted to post. She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling. The numbers don't add up. They're reporting donations to overseas charities that I don't think exist. I tried searching for these organizations, and either they have no web presence at all, or they look, I don't know, fake? Like websites created yesterday. More shuffling. And there are these transfers from my trust account, the one they've managed since Grandma died. Large amounts moving into these charitable initiatives that I never approved. I'm going to have to confront them, but I need more evidence first. Something doesn't feel right. The memo ended abruptly, leaving me frozen in place, staring at the screen. The next several recordings detailed her growing suspicions, unexplained account activities, hush phone calls, new offshore business entities. The final memo was dated 3 days before the accident. I've got enough to take to a lawyer now, Rachel said, her voice tight with resolve. The foundation is a shell. They've been moving money through it for years, mine, probably Emily's too. I don't know if it's just tax evasion or something worse, but I'm done being silent. Emily deserves to know the truth about our family. About our parents. She never made it to that lawyer appointment. Her car, the blue Corolla my parents had so callously sold, had been hit head-on by a drunk driver on a rainy Tuesday evening. The accident investigation had been straightforward. No one had questioned anything. Until now. The next morning, I walked into town in a daze, my mind racing with questions and terrible possibilities. I found myself outside a small law office with a discreet sign, Jonah Williams, attorney at law. Without giving myself time to reconsider, I pushed open the door and asked for a consultation. Jonah turned out to be younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He listened without interruption as I carefully explained my situation, leaving out my suspicions about my parents' possible role in Rachel's death. That was too enormous, too horrifying to voice aloud yet. So you believe your parents may have misrepresented your sister's will and potentially misappropriated funds from accounts meant for you both? He summarized when I finished. Yes, I said. And I have evidence suggesting they've been running fraudulent charities. Jonah tapped his pen against his notepad. We can request a copy of the will from the probate court. That's public record. As for the financial matters, that would require more investigation, but if what you found is accurate, there could be serious legal implications. I just want what Rachel meant for me to have, I said. And I want to know the truth. He nodded. Let me look into the will first. We'll start there and build our case methodically. Over the next few days, I threw myself into organizing Rachel's digital files, creating backups of backups, securing her evidence. I felt her presence guiding me, her voice in the memos giving me strength. Meanwhile, I posted anonymously on Reddit about the blue Corolla, describing it in detail and asking if anyone had purchased such a car recently from Eastern Motors. My sister died. Her car contained something important to me. Parents sold it without telling me. Please help. 3 days later, I received a message from someone named Michael. I think I bought your sister's car. There was an envelope hidden in the glove compartment, taped to the top where it wouldn't be easily noticed. I didn't open it, but the name Emily is written on it. Is that you? My heart stopped. Rachel had left me something my parents hadn't found. Yes, I'm Emily. That was my sister's car. Can we meet? We arranged to meet at a public park near downtown Oakridge the following afternoon. I arrived early, scanning the area nervously, wondering if I was making a mistake trusting a stranger from the internet. Then I saw him, a man about my age walking toward the bench where I waited, holding a white envelope in his hand. Emily, he asked tentatively. I nodded, unable to speak. I'm Michael, he said, sitting beside me but keeping a respectful distance. I found this the day after I bought the car. I almost threw it away, but something told me it might be important. He handed me the envelope. My name was written on the front in Rachel's distinctive handwriting, slightly slanted, with a looping Y. Thank you, I whispered. You have no idea what this means to me. I think I do, actually, he said quietly. I lost my brother 2 years ago. If someone had found something of his meant for me. He trailed off, then stood. I'll give you privacy to read it. As he walked away, I stared at the envelope, trembling. Inside was Rachel's final message to me, and possibly the key to understanding everything that had happened since she died. I took a deep breath and carefully opened the seal, ready for whatever storm would come next. The weight of the envelope in my hands felt heavier than paper should. I traced my fingers over my name in Rachel's handwriting, remembering how she always crossed her T's with a slight upward flick. Taking a deep breath, I carefully opened it, trying not to tear what might be her final message to me. Inside was a single folded page, dated just 1 day before the accident. My hands trembled as I began to read. Ink. If you're reading this, something's happened to me. I've hidden this letter in my glove compartment because I don't trust keeping it at home or on my computer. I don't know who might be watching. There's no easy way to say this. Mom and Dad are not who they pretend to be. I've discovered financial irregularities in their foundation and our trust accounts that point to years of fraud. They've been moving money, our money, from Grandma's estate through shell companies and fake charities. I've been tracking the transfers for months now, documenting everything. I've backed everything up to my cloud drive. User, Rachel P. design@cloud.com. Password, M&Rach forever, 2023. There are bank statements, screenshots, recordings of conversations, everything you'll need to protect yourself and what's rightfully yours. I was planning to confront them with a lawyer present, but if you're reading this, I'm so sorry to leave this burden on you. M. You deserve better than this mess. But I know you're stronger than you realize. You've always been the brave one, even if you couldn't see it. Whatever happens, remember that the truth matters. And remember that I love you, always have, always will. Your sister, Rachel. P.S. Don't trust them with anything they say about my will. I left everything to you. No exceptions. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. Rachel's voice seemed to echo in my head, clear and determined. I carefully folded the paper and tucked it into my jacket, close to my heart. Michael was waiting at a respectful distance, pretending to be interested in a nearby flower bed. When I approached, his expression was gentle with understanding. Thank you, I said again, my voice steadier now. This means more than I can explain. He nodded. I'm glad I found you. The car, it's a good car. I take care of it. Something about his simple kindness broke through the numbness I'd been carrying. She loved that car, I said. Her name was Rachel. I know, he said quietly. The registration was still in the glove compartment. Rachel Patterson. We stood in silence for a moment, 2 strangers connected by loss and a blue Toyota Corolla. If you ever want to see it, the car, just let me know, Michael offered, handing me his number written on a small card. No pressure. Just if it would help. I thanked him again and watched him walk away, wondering briefly what Rachel would have thought of him. She would have approved, I decided. She always liked genuine people. Back in my small rented room, I immediately logged into Rachel's cloud drive using the credentials from her letter. The screen filled with dozens of neatly organized folders. Rachel had always been methodical, even in her chaos. The folder labeled evidence contained everything she'd mentioned and more: spreadsheets tracking suspicious transactions, screenshots of account activities, recordings of phone calls where my parents discussed moving funds, and scanned documents showing the creation of at least 5 fake charitable organizations. Most damning was a subfolder titled Trust Manipulation that contained proof that my parents had been systematically draining both Rachel's and my trust accounts, set up by our grandmother before her death, and funneling the money through their foundation into offshore accounts. According to Rachel's meticulous documentation, they'd stolen over $870,000 from our trusts in the past 3 years alone. No wonder they could afford luxury cruises and Bali vacations while claiming to be investing in our futures. I downloaded everything, creating multiple backups on separate drives. Then I called Jonah Williams. I have evidence, I told him when he answered. Lots of it. The next morning, I sat in Jonah's office as he reviewed Rachel's files, his expression growing increasingly grave. "This is extremely serious," he said finally, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "What you have here goes beyond misappropriation of inherited funds. This is systematic fraud that likely violates numerous federal laws." "What do we do?" I asked. "First, I've confirmed that Rachel's will does indeed leave everything to you, including her personal effects, financial assets, and artistic works. Your parents filed the will with the court but never executed its provisions. That alone is actionable." He organized some papers on his desk, thoughtful. "As for the larger financial issues, we need to proceed carefully. Your parents have resources and connections. If they realize you're investigating them, they might try to destroy evidence or move remaining assets beyond reach. So, we don't confront them directly yet?" Jonah shook his head. "Not yet. I suggest we begin by securing what legally belongs to you through Rachel's will. Once that's established, we can address the trust violations and potential criminal aspects." Over the next week, Jonah filed the necessary legal paperwork to enforce Rachel's will while I continued working at the flower shop, finding unexpected peace in the simple tasks of arranging blossoms and greenery. Lily, my boss, noticed my distraction but didn't pry. "Whatever storm you're weathering," she said one afternoon as we closed the shop, "remember that flowers still bloom after the hardest rains." At night, I sifted through more of Rachel's files, building a timeline of our parents' activities. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. For years, they had presented themselves as philanthropic pillars of the community while secretly manipulating accounts, creating shell companies, and evading taxes. A week after meeting Michael, I received a text from Jonah. "Court granted preliminary order regarding ours will. You are now legal beneficiary. Can move forward with next steps." That evening, I started an anonymous Instagram account called Truth After Rachel and uploaded my first post, a simple black background with white text. Some people wear masks, so convincing they fool even their children. But every mask eventually slips. I included no names, no specific accusations, just a haunting clip of Rachel's voice from one of her memos. "The truth matters. Always." Within hours, the post had been shared by several of Rachel's friends who still followed accounts using her name tags. By morning, it had hundreds of likes and dozens of comments, many asking who was behind the account. I continued posting cryptic messages accompanied by carefully selected clips from Rachel's voice memos, each hinting at the truth without explicitly stating it. Engagement grew exponentially, especially after Rachel's college roommate, now a popular beauty vlogger, shared the account with her thousands of followers. "Does anyone else think this is connected to the Patterson family?" Someone commented on the third day. "Their daughter died last year, and now they're suddenly globetrotting and rebranding their foundation." The comment section exploded with speculation. People began sharing links to my parents' recent social media posts, noting the stark contrast between their current carefree lifestyle and their somber appearances at charity galas just months earlier. On day 5, I shared the first concrete piece of evidence, a redacted bank statement showing transfers from a trust account to an entity called Global Children's Relief Fund, one of the fake charities Rachel had identified. When charity becomes a shell game, who really benefits? I captioned it. The post was shared hundreds of times, reaching beyond Rachel's immediate social circle to journalists and financial bloggers who began asking questions publicly about my parents' foundation. Just as the online momentum was building, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Emily? It's Dorothy. Your landlady." Her voice sounded strained. "There are people here asking about you. A couple saying they're your parents. They seem insistent." My blood ran cold. They were supposed to be in Bali for another 3 days.
"How had they found me?"
"I haven't told them anything," Dorothy continued, lowering her voice. "But they're showing people your picture at the shops downtown. They're telling everyone you're unwell, that you need medical attention. They have some kind of paper with them." "Don't tell them anything," I said, panic rising in my throat. "I'll be back soon." I called Jonah immediately, explaining the situation. They're likely claiming you're mentally incompetent, he said, his voice tight with concern. It's a common tactic when someone feels threatened by potential exposure. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you. Within an hour, Jonah arrived at the coffee shop where I'd been hiding, a folder of documents under his arm. I've prepared for this possibility, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. I have the court order establishing you as Rachel's beneficiary, plus an emergency petition to prevent any involuntary psychiatric hold based on their claims. Can they force me to go with them? My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. Not if we act quickly, Jonah assured me. But we need to confront them directly now. It's time to move this into the open. We walked together to the town square, where my parents were still showing my photo to local shopkeepers. My mother spotted me first, her face transforming into a mask of maternal concern so convincing that for a split second, I almost believed it myself. Emily. Thank goodness. She rushed toward me, arms outstretched. We've been so worried about you. My father approached more cautiously, eyeing Jonah. Who's this? I'm Jonah Williams, Emily's attorney, he said, his voice professionally neutral. I understand you've been making some concerning claims about my client's mental state. My mother's expression hardened slightly before softening again. We're just concerned parents trying to help our daughter. She disappeared without warning, stopped taking her medication. I've never been on medication, I interrupted, finding my voice at last. And you know exactly why I left. People were beginning to gather around us, curious about the drama unfolding in their usually quiet town square. Emily has had psychological issues since her sister's death, my father said loudly, addressing the growing crowd as much as Jonah. We have documentation from her doctor recommending inpatient treatment. Jonah stepped forward, opening his folder. I have here a court order establishing Emily as the sole beneficiary of Rachel Patterson's estate, which your clients have failed to execute properly. I also have evidence suggesting financial improprieties involving trust accounts belonging to both sisters. My father's face darkened. This is absurd. We're taking our daughter home. No, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. You're not. As if on cue, a woman pushed through the crowd, holding up her phone. Are you the Pattersons? The ones from the Truth After Rachel account. More phones appeared, people recording the confrontation. Someone in the crowd shouted, they're the ones who sold their dead daughter's car for a cruise. My mother blanched. That's completely false. We would never. You did, I said, stepping closer. You sold Rachel's car without telling me. You wore her ashes as jewelry on your divorce cruise. You've been stealing from our trust accounts for years. And I have proof of all of it. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. I saw phones typing, sharing, spreading the story in real time. My father grabbed my arm. That's enough. We're leaving. Jonah moved between us. Touch her again, and I'll add assault to the legal complaints we're filing. A police officer approached, drawn by the commotion. Is there a problem here? What followed was a surreal half-hour of competing claims, document presentations, and growing public spectacle. By the time it was over, my parents had been escorted to their hotel with a warning not to approach me again without legal representation present. As the crowd dispersed, Lily from the flower shop appeared at my side. Your room isn't safe anymore, she said simply. There's an apartment above my shop. It's yours if you need it. That night, as I settled into Lily's spare room, my phone buzzed continuously with notifications. The confrontation had been recorded from multiple angles and was spreading across social media platforms. Hashtag #TruthAfterRachel was trending locally. A local journalist named Tessa Morgan had sent me a direct message on Instagram. I've been investigating the Patterson Foundation for months. We should talk. I stared at my phone, heart pounding. The storm I'd started was gathering strength, moving beyond my control. But instead of feeling afraid, I felt something else. Something that reminded me of Rachel. It felt like justice, beginning to unfold. Tessa Morgan's office smelled of coffee and printer ink. She'd covered one wall with a complex web of photos, notes, and connecting strings, an analog version of the digital files Rachel had created. I've been tracking your parents' foundation since last year, she explained, pointing to financial statements pinned to the wall. Something about their reported charitable activities never added up, but I couldn't prove anything concrete. I placed Rachel's external hard drive on her desk. This might help. For 3 hours, we went through Rachel's evidence together, Tessa occasionally whistling low under her breath or making rapid notes on her laptop. "This is incredible," she said finally. "Your sister was thorough. With this and my own research, we have enough for a comprehensive exposé. Are you ready for what comes next?" "What has come next?" Tessa leaned back in her chair. "Once this story breaks, everything changes. The authorities will get involved. There will be investigations, possibly criminal charges. Your parents will likely face legal consequences, and their reputation will be destroyed." She studied my face. "Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Rachel's letter, about her voice in those memos, about the car sold without a second thought. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The article was published 3 days later, appearing simultaneously in the local paper and a major online news outlet where Tessa had connections. The headline was simple but devastating. Philanthropic fraud: how the Patterson Foundation became a family slush fund. The piece was meticulously researched, combining Rachel's evidence with Tessa's independent investigation and statements from financial experts. It detailed years of systematic fraud, revealing how my parents had used their charitable foundation to siphon money from their daughters' inheritances while evading taxes and building a network of fake charities. Within hours, the story was picked up by national news outlets. Hashtag Patterson fraud began trending alongside hashtag Truth After Rachel. Former business associates rushed to distance themselves from my parents, issuing statements expressing shock and dismay. The cruise line that had featured my parents in promotional materials quickly removed their content and announced they were reviewing the partnership. The luxury watchmaker that had named my father Philanthropist of the Year just months earlier issued a formal retraction. As public outrage built, more people came forward with their own stories: former employees describing toxic workplace behavior, charity partners who had questioned missing funds only to be gaslight or threatened with lawsuits, even distant relatives who had been alienated after asking too many questions about family finances. In the midst of the media storm, I decided it was time to reveal myself. With Jonah by my side for legal protection and Tessa recording for journalistic documentation, I sat before a camera in the local news studio. "My name is Emily Patterson," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm the sister of Rachel Patterson, who died 8 months ago. And I'm the daughter of Robert and Diana Patterson." I told the whole story, from Rachel's death through the selling of her car, the discovery of her evidence, and my parents' attempt to paint me as mentally unstable. "This isn't just about money," I said toward the end. "It's about honoring my sister's memory and her final wish for the truth to be known." Rachel spent the last months of her life documenting our parents' fraud because she believed that truth matters, even when it hurts, even when it breaks your heart. The interview aired that evening and immediately went viral. My inbox flooded with messages, some offering support, others sharing similar stories of familial betrayal, many from Rachel's friends expressing gratitude for bringing the truth to light. The legal machinery moved swiftly after that. The FBI opened an investigation into wire fraud and tax evasion. The state attorney general froze my parents' assets, pending investigation. Former business partners filed civil suits, claiming they'd been deceived. Through it all, my parents maintained their innocence publicly while their lawyers scrambled to negotiate behind the scenes. They gave a single interview to a sympathetic journalist, portraying themselves as misunderstood philanthropists being persecuted by a grief-stricken, mentally unbalanced daughter. "We only wanted to help Emily move forward," my mother said, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Everything we did was out of love for our daughters." The performance might have worked before, but now people saw through the mask. Comments under the interview video were scathing, many pointing out specific contradictions between their statements and the documented evidence. 3 weeks after the story broke, my parents were formally charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and misappropriation of funds. They appeared in court for their arraignment, looking smaller somehow, less polished than I remembered. I sat in the back row beside Jonah, watching as they entered pleas of not guilty. My mother scanned the courtroom, her eyes eventually finding mine. For a brief moment, her mask slipped completely, revealing a flash of naked hatred that confirmed everything I'd come to understand about her. "All rise," the bailiff called as the judge prepared to set bail conditions. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. I declined to speak, letting Jonah handle the press while I slipped away to the quiet coffee shop across the street. Michael was waiting there, as we'd arranged earlier. He'd been a steady presence throughout the chaos, offering support without pressure, understanding without judgment. "How are you holding up?" he asked, sliding a cup of tea toward me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel victorious, but mostly I feel tired." He nodded. "That makes sense. You've been fighting a war on multiple fronts. And it's not over yet. The trial could take months. But you're not alone anymore," he reminded me gently. It was true. In the weeks since the story had broken, I'd built a support network I never expected. Jonah, whose legal guidance had become friendship. Lily, who'd given me a safe place to live. Tessa, whose journalistic integrity had helped bring the truth to light. Karen, who testified about what she knew despite decades of friendship with my parents. And Michael, whose simple kindness had been a steady anchor. Most surprisingly, Rachel's friends had rallied around me, people I'd barely known before, who reached out with memories, photos, and stories I'd never heard. Through them, I discovered new dimensions of my sister that I'd never known, pieces of her life that our parents had never been part of. The court battle played out over the following months. My parents hired expensive defense attorneys who tried every tactic to discredit the evidence, to paint Rachel as confused, to portray me as vindictive. But the documentation was too thorough, the pattern too clear. As the prosecution presented their case, it became increasingly apparent that my parents' fraud went even deeper than Rachel had discovered. The investigation had uncovered additional shell companies, hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands, and evidence suggesting they'd been planning this scheme since before Rachel and I were born. The decisive moment came when I was called to testify. The courtroom fell silent as I took the stand, my parents watching impassively from the defense table. After establishing my background and relationship to the defendants, the prosecutor handed me Rachel's letter, the one Michael had found in the car. "Miss Patterson, would you please read this letter for the court?" My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the familiar paper. I took a deep breath and began to read Rachel's final message aloud, her words echoing through the silent courtroom. When I finished, many people were wiping tears, including 2 jurors. I looked directly at my parents for the first time since the trial began. My father was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched. My mother was looking down, her expression unreadable. "Miss Patterson," the prosecutor continued, "in your own words, what do you believe your sister was trying to accomplish by leaving this evidence?" I thought carefully before answering. Rachel believed in truth, even when it was painful. She wanted to protect me, but she also wanted to stop something wrong that had been happening for years. She believed our parents had betrayed our trust, and she wanted to make it right. The defense attorney tried to suggest that Rachel had been confused, that she'd misinterpreted legitimate financial transactions. But his cross-examination only highlighted how thoroughly she had documented everything, how precise her evidence was. As I stepped down from the witness stand, I felt a weight lifting, not completely gone, but lighter. Rachel's voice had finally been heard. The jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all major counts. My parents showed no visible reaction as the judgment was read, standing perfectly still in their expensive, subdued courtroom attire. The judge set a sentencing date for the following month and revoked their bail, citing flight risk due to the discovery of recently purchased property in a non-extradition country. As they were led away in handcuffs, my mother finally looked at me directly, not with hatred now, but with something like confusion, as if she couldn't quite comprehend how her carefully constructed world had collapsed. Outside, rain fell softly as I walked down the courthouse steps with Jonah beside me. Reporters called questions, cameras flashed, but it all seemed distant now, like watching someone else's story unfold. "It's over," Jonah said quietly. But it wasn't not really. It was just beginning. The small house sat at the edge of Oakridge, nestled among pine trees with a view of distant mountains. It wasn't grand or impressive, just a simple craftsman with a wide porch and large windows designed to capture natural light. But when I turned the key in the lock for the first time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Homecoming. It's perfect, Michael said, carrying a box of books through the front door. Rachel would have loved it. He was right. This was exactly the kind of place Rachel and I had talked about sharing someday, far from our parents' world of status and appearance, filled instead with warmth and creativity. 6 months had passed since the verdict. My parents were serving their sentences, shorter than many thought fair, but substantial enough to ensure they wouldn't return to their old lives. Their assets had been liquidated, their foundation dissolved, their reputation destroyed. Through the court-ordered restitution, Rachel's estate and my trust had been restored. After legal fees and taxes, I had enough to buy this small house and studio outright and to establish something that mattered far more: the Rachel Patterson Foundation for Creative Healing. Unlike my parents' fraudulent charity, this foundation had a simple, transparent mission: providing art therapy programs for people processing grief and trauma. We'd started small, working with local counseling centers to offer workshops for teens who had lost siblings or parents. The idea had come during my own grief journey. After the trial ended, I'd finally had space to properly mourn Rachel, not just the loss of her, but the loss of the family I thought I had. During those dark weeks, painting had been my lifeline, turning pain into color and shape when words failed. Today was moving day, but also the Foundation's first public event, an open-house art exhibition featuring works created by our initial therapy group. Lily had provided flowers for the studio space, Karen had helped with catering, and Jonah had managed the legal paperwork to establish the nonprofit. As I unpacked books in what would become my home office, I found Rachel's old sketchbook, the one she'd used during college, filled with her distinctive style and vibrant colors. I decided to frame several pages for the Foundation's walls, keeping her spirit alive in the work that carried her name. Emily. Tessa called from the front door. People are starting to arrive at the studio. Should we head over? The studio was a converted barn on the property, just a short walk from the main house. We'd spent weeks renovating it with large work tables, easels, and supply cabinets, a perfect space for both creation and community. By the time Michael, Tessa, and I reached the studio, a small crowd had gathered. The teens from our first workshop were proudly showing their artwork to family members and friends. Local artists who had volunteered as mentors were chatting with potential donors. A reporter from the regional arts magazine was taking photographs. "This is amazing," Karen said, hugging me as I entered. "From something so terrible, you've created something beautiful." I introduced Karen to the others as my honorary aunt who stood by me when it mattered most. She beamed, linking her arm through mine as we toured the exhibition. The artwork produced by our first participants was raw and powerful, abstract pieces expressing rage and loss, portraits of departed loved ones, landscapes of imagined healing places. Each piece came with an artist's statement explaining their process and journey. "You must be Emily," said a woman I didn't recognize, approaching me near the refreshment table.
I'm Vanessa.
"My daughter Zoe is in your program." She nodded toward a quiet girl studying a vibrant abstract painting. "Zoe is incredibly talented," I said. "Her piece about her father is one of the most moving in the show." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. She hasn't spoken about him since the accident last year. Not until she started coming here. Whatever you're doing, it's reaching her when nothing else could. Throughout the evening, I heard similar stories from parents and guardians, breakthroughs, small moments of connection, the first tentative steps toward healing. With each conversation, I felt Rachel's presence more strongly, as if she were moving through the room, witnessing what her truth had made possible. Near the end of the event, I gave a brief speech thanking everyone who had helped make the foundation a reality. I kept it simple, focusing on the artists and their courage rather than my own story, which had been told enough in courtrooms and news articles. Creating something from pain doesn't erase the loss, I concluded, looking around at the gathered faces. But it honors it. It transforms it. And most importantly, it connects us to others who understand. That's what this space is for: connection, transformation, and truth. After the guests departed, I walked back to the house alone, needing a moment of quiet reflection. On the porch, I found a small package wrapped in brown paper with no shipping label or return address. Inside was a delicate gold pendant, the one that had contained Rachel's ashes, the one my mother had worn as a good luck charm on the cruise. Attached was a handwritten note. For Emily. She never screamed. But she made the world hear her anyway. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but I knew immediately it had come from someone who had been watching the story unfold, someone who had found a way to recover this final piece of Rachel and return it to where it belonged. I clasped the pendant around my neck, feeling its weight against my skin. Not a burden now, but a reminder. A connection. The next morning, I woke early and packed a small bag. I'd promised myself that once the foundation was launched and the house was settled, I would take the journey Rachel and I had planned, driving up the coast, stopping whenever I wanted, staying in cute little towns along the way. Michael had offered to water the plants and check on the house while I was gone. Lily would handle the flower deliveries for the next workshop. Jonah had all the foundation paperwork in order. Everything was taken care of. As I loaded my bag into the trunk, I carefully placed Rachel's photo on the dashboard. Not the formal portrait our parents had favored, but a candid shot of her laughing on a beach trip years ago, hair wild in the wind, eyes crinkled with joy. The morning sun painted the horizon gold as I pulled away from the house, Rachel's pendant warm against my skin, her photo smiling on the dashboard, her legacy secure in the foundation that bore her name. My parents had taken her car, the last physical piece of her I thought I had. But in pursuing truth and justice, I'd found something they could never replace or take away: her spirit, her courage, her voice, living on through me and through everyone the foundation would help in years to come. As I drove toward the sunrise, I whispered the words that had become both my mantra and my mission. Truth matters. Always.